Nobody could understand why the billionaire's young son was crying every night. It was not the kind of crying that a child does when he falls or gets hurt. This was different, quiet yet heavy, a sadness that filled the room even though the house was full of laughter, toys, and all the comforts a child could ever wish for. The billionaire, a man used to controlling every aspect of his life, found himself helpless and confused. He had wealth, power, and influence, but none of it could stop the tears of his little boy. The house was enormous, with rooms decorated in the finest style, with servants, toys, and entertainment from every corner of the world. But despite all of this, the boy often sat quietly in his room, hugging his favorite stuffed animal, tears slowly rolling down his cheeks. The walls of the mansion echoed with his cries, and yet no one could figure out the reason. Everyone in the household tried to help, from the nannies to the private tutors, but every attempt failed. The boy remained sad, leaving everyone frustrated and worried. His father, the billionaire, could not understand why someone with so much could be so unhappy. He had given his son the best of everything: luxury cars, expensive gadgets, exotic pets, and even private lessons with the best teachers. But each gift, each new toy, seemed to make no difference at all. The tears kept coming, as if no amount of wealth could comfort the boy's heart. The staff whispered among themselves, wondering if the child was ill or if something terrible had happened that they did not know about. Some believed that maybe the boy missed having a friend, someone to play with who could understand him. Others thought that he might be lonely, surrounded by riches but without true companionship. The mystery of the child's sadness grew every day, and even the billionaire could not solve it. Every evening, when the lights in the mansion dimmed, the boy's cries grew louder, and his father would sit outside his room, listening, wondering what went wrong. He remembered holding his son as a baby, feeling pure joy, and he could not understand how this little boy, with all the love and care around him, could feel such pain. Each night, the father tried to coax him with soothing words, lullabies, and gentle hugs, but nothing worked. The boy would look at him with big, sad eyes and then turn away, his tears spilling silently. The household grew tense, and everyone became more alert, noticing even the smallest signs of distress in the boy. Every servant, every teacher, every family member tried to find the answer. They examined every detail of his daily life, his food, his toys, his schedule. But everything seemed perfect, and yet the crying continued. It was a puzzle that no one could solve, a question that lingered in the air like an invisible cloud. The boy himself did not know how to explain his feelings. His world was quiet because he was deaf, and words were not something he could use to communicate easily. The emotions inside him, a mix of confusion, sadness, and longing, built up like a storm, spilling out in tears that no one could understand. Each night, as he cried, he hoped that someone would notice. Someone would truly see his feelings and understand the sadness that no amount of toys or luxury could fix. The billionaire felt a mix of frustration and helplessness. He could buy almost anything in the world, but he could not buy happiness for his son. The mystery weighed heavily on him, and he began to realize that wealth alone was not enough to solve all problems. There was something deeper, something emotional, something invisible that he could not touch or control. The boy's tears were not about money or gifts. They were about connection, understanding, and being seen for who he really was. And so, every night, the same scene repeated itself: the boy crying quietly in his room, the father standing outside, wondering what he could do. The mansion, which to outsiders seemed full of joy, was quiet and heavy with questions. Nobody could answer why a child with everything could be so sad. The mystery had begun, and no one in the household had the key to unlock it, not yet, at least. The boy's struggle was not something that could be seen at first glance. Many people assumed that because he lived in a grand mansion with every possible luxury, he had nothing to worry about, but the truth was completely different. The young boy faced challenges that no amount of money could fix. Being deaf in a world where everyone else spoke freely made him feel trapped in silence. His thoughts, his feelings, and even his laughter were sometimes stuck inside him, waiting for someone who could understand without words. Every day, he tried to communicate with the staff and his family, but the results were often frustrating. Simple things, like wanting a specific toy or asking for a favorite snack, became difficult to explain. People around him tried their best, but gestures and notes could not fully express the emotion swelling inside him. He often felt invisible, like his voice did not matter, like no one could truly see what was happening inside his heart. School was another challenge. Even though he had private tutors and special lessons, he often felt isolated. Watching other children laugh and speak freely while he struggled to respond left him feeling lonely. The boy wanted to be part of the world around him, to join in games and conversations, but communication barriers built invisible walls that he could not break. Every day, the isolation seemed heavier, pressing on his young heart with a weight that no adult could lift. At home, the boy tried to cope in his own ways. Sometimes he would retreat to his room, sitting quietly with his toys, staring out the window at the garden, hoping that someone would notice him without needing him to explain. Other times, he would scribble messages on paper, only to watch adults misunderstand or dismiss them. The frustration often turned into tears, silent at first, then louder as emotions became impossible to contain. The boy's family, despite their love and concern, struggled to understand the depth of his feelings. They wanted to help, but their methods were limited. Most solutions involved material things, more toys, more games, more attention, but none addressed the loneliness and need for understanding that was the real cause of his sadness. The boy's heart longed for something simple yet impossible to buy: genuine connection. Someone who could look into his eyes and know exactly what he felt. Even his father, the billionaire, began to see the limits of wealth. He had built a world around his son filled with every comfort, but none of it could touch the boy's heart. The realization was painful, yet important. The father knew he could not force happiness or communication, no matter how many gifts he offered. This understanding only added to the tension, because while he could give everything material, the emotional gap remained, wide and unbridgeable. The boy's struggle was also physical in a subtle way. Learning to navigate the world without hearing meant paying attention to small details others ignored. He noticed every change in light, every shadow, every movement. Because sounds could not warn him, every footstep behind him startled him, every sudden gesture could make him anxious. The world felt bigger and harsher because he could not rely on sound, and that made even ordinary days a constant challenge. Yet despite all this, the boy was brave in his own way. Every tear he shed was a silent act of courage. Every attempt to communicate was a small victory. Even when adults failed to understand him, he kept trying, hoping for a moment when someone would finally see his heart. This hope, quiet but unshakable, was the only thing that kept him going, waiting for the day when someone would truly connect with him. And so, the boy's struggle continued, unseen by most, misunderstood by many, yet profoundly real. It was a mix of isolation, frustration, longing, and silent courage, the kind of struggle that cannot be fixed with money, prestige, or even endless attention. It required patience, empathy, and a heart willing to listen without words, something that had not yet arrived in the boy's life. But somewhere in the shadows, the seeds of change were quietly waiting, ready to bloom with the arrival of someone who could truly understand him. The billionaire, a man used to having control over every aspect of his life, found himself facing a problem he could not solve. His son's tears haunted him more than any business failure, more than any lost deal, more than any disappointment he had ever faced. He was surrounded by advisors, assistants, and experts in every field, yet none of them could explain why the boy cried night after night. The realization that money could not fix this situation was both shocking and frightening for him. He remembered the day his son was born, holding him in his arms and feeling a rush of joy unlike anything else. At that moment, he believed he could protect the boy from every pain, every struggle, and every sorrow in the world. But now, years later, he saw that his wealth and influence meant nothing against the silent, unspoken pain of a child who could not express himself fully. The father tried to do everything within his power. He hired the best therapists who specialized in children with hearing disabilities, hoping they could uncover the reason behind the boy's sadness. He spent hours in private consultations, asking questions, analyzing every behavior, and looking for patterns that could lead to a solution. Yet the boy's emotions remained a mystery, flowing silently like water through cracks in the floor, impossible to hold or contain. At home, the billionaire watched his son closely, noticing even the smallest signs of discomfort or distress: a slight frown, a sudden withdrawal, a tear falling quietly during playtime. Every detail was logged in his mind, trying to make sense of it. But the more he tried to solve the puzzle, the more he realized that the boy's heart could not be fixed by observation alone. There was something deeper, something emotional, that required more than expertise or attention. The billionaire's concern grew into obsession. He began to feel helpless in a way he had never experienced before. Nights were the hardest, when the mansion was quiet and the boy's cries echoed through the halls, the father would sit outside his son's room, struggling to understand, questioning himself, wondering if he had failed as a parent. He thought about every decision he had made regarding the boy's upbringing, questioning whether money and comfort had replaced the emotional connection his son truly needed. Even the boy's mother, supportive and caring, admitted that they were at a loss. She worried constantly, staying awake with the father during the nights when the cries seemed louder. She tried to comfort the boy herself, but even her love could not reach the depths of his silent sorrow. The family began to realize that no amount of wealth or gifts could solve the emotional challenges their son faced, and this awareness made their concern even more intense. The billionaire began to observe the household staff as well, noticing that even they seemed confused and frustrated. No one had the tools to understand the boy's inner world. Everyone's best efforts were falling short, and the father realized that solving this mystery would require patience, empathy, and a fresh perspective, something beyond his control, something beyond money. He started to wonder if perhaps the solution lay not in specialists or expensive programs, but in someone with a natural ability to connect, someone who could see the boy for who he really was without judging or expecting anything. This thought both scared and intrigued him, because he had never trusted anyone fully with his son's emotions before. The billionaire knew that he needed help, but not the kind that came with a price tag. He needed someone who could truly understand, someone patient and compassionate, capable of seeing beyond the boy's tears. And so, the concern that began as worry grew into a deep, almost desperate determination. He would not rest until he understood his son, until he could ease the boy's pain and bring joy back into his life. This concern, unlike anything he had felt in the world of business, taught him humility, patience, and the realization that some of life's greatest challenges could not be solved with money or power alone. The billionaire now faced a new mission, one that required the heart more than the mind, the soul more than the wallet, a mission that would eventually lead to a surprising and life-changing discovery. Amidst the quiet tension in the mansion, a young black girl arrived, bringing with her a calm presence that seemed almost out of place in the grand house. She was hired as an assistant, but from the very first day, it was clear that she was different. There was a softness in her eyes, a patience in her movements, and a way of noticing details that others overlooked. From the moment she stepped into the boy's life, the air seemed to shift slightly, as if something long missing had quietly arrived. Unlike the other staff who tried to entertain the boy with toys, games, and gadgets, she did not rush to fix his sadness. Instead, she observed him, watched the way he played, the way he moved, the way his hands trembled when he was upset. She noticed the small signs, the way his shoulders drooped, the way his eyes lingered on certain objects, the way he clutched his stuffed animal when he felt alone. These were signals that others had missed, signals that spoke louder than words. At first, the boy was cautious, unsure of this new presence. He had grown used to adults trying and failing to understand him. His trust had been tested and broken many times, yet there was something different about the girl, something in the way she sat quietly next to him, something in the way she mirrored his movements, that made him feel safe. Her patience was endless, and unlike others who grew frustrated or distracted, she remained calm, focused only on him. The girl did not speak to him immediately, knowing that words might scare or overwhelm. Instead, she used gestures, gentle touches, and drawings to communicate. Slowly, carefully, she began to bridge the gap between his silent world and hers. She let him take the lead, allowing him to show what he wanted, what he liked, and what he feared. For the first time in a long time, the boy felt that someone truly wanted to understand him, without judgment, without expectation. Over the next few days, she created a routine that made him feel secure. They played simple games that encouraged communication without forcing words. They used colors, hand movements, and tiny notes to share thoughts, and with each passing moment, the boy's walls began to crack, revealing the emotions he had kept locked inside. The girl's presence became a quiet anchor, a point of stability in a world that often felt overwhelming and confusing. The billionaire watched this unfold from a distance, astonished. He had never seen anyone connect with his son in this way, not with toys, not with therapists, not with tutors. No one had succeeded, yet this young girl, with her quiet determination and gentle heart, seemed to understand the boy instinctively. He could see it in the way the boy's eyes lit up when she approached, in the way his laughter, small and fragile at first, began to return. It was not magic, and it was not luck, The girl had a skill that could not be taught, a natural empathy that allowed her to see beyond appearances, beyond wealth, beyond disability. She recognized the boy as a person first, not as the son of a billionaire, not as a child with challenges, but as a soul longing for understanding. Her kindness and insight became the bridge the boy had been waiting for, and slowly, silently, hope began to grow. Even the staff noticed the change, whispering among themselves about how the girl had accomplished what they could not. The boy began to spend more time awake, more time curious, more time reaching out, and for the first time, his tears began to fade, replaced by tentative smiles and small expressions of joy. The mansion, once heavy with unanswered questions and silent sorrow, now had a new energy, subtle but powerful. The arrival of the black girl had begun to change everything, and the first chapter of the boy's healing had quietly begun. After the girl's arrival, the boy slowly began to notice her presence more than anyone else's. At first, it was just small glances, the briefest moments where his eyes followed her across the room. He was cautious, wary of being hurt or misunderstood. He had lived so long in a world where adults tried and failed to understand him, and he did not want to be disappointed again. But the girl had a quiet patience, a calmness that seemed to respect his hesitations, and it made him curious. She did not force conversation, she did not demand attention. Instead, she allowed him to take the lead, letting him explore her gestures and presence at his own pace. She noticed the smallest signals of trust, a hand that lingered on a drawing, a fleeting smile, a moment where he let go of his stuffed animal without fear. These small moments became victories in themselves, each one slowly knitting a fragile thread of trust between them. The girl created activities that allowed him to express himself without pressure. She brought out colored pencils, papers, and blocks, simple tools that became windows into his thoughts. She would draw something, then wait, giving him time to respond. He began to imitate her drawings, then add his own. Then, after days of quiet observation, he started showing her small secrets, a hidden toy, a favorite corner of the garden, gestures that revealed a part of his inner world. Every day, the bond grew stronger, not with words, but with shared moments and understanding. The boy began to anticipate her presence, looking forward to the moments when she would sit beside him, letting him control the pace of their interaction. He began to relax, his body less tense, his eyes less fearful. The mansion, once a place of quiet sadness, slowly felt warmer, safer, alive with small sparks of connection. The girl also recognized the boy's fears, gently addressing them without forcing change. When he hesitated to try a new game, she encouraged him with smiles and nods, never pushing, only guiding. She allowed mistakes to happen, laughing softly when he made errors, turning them into opportunities for learning and trust. Her respect for his pace made him feel powerful in ways he had never experienced. He began to trust her not just as a helper, but as a friend, a confidant, someone who could understand him without words. The billionaire watched from a distance, quietly observing the subtle changes. He saw his son beginning to open up, the little smiles, the small attempts at laughter, the slow but steady reduction of tears. For the first time, he realized that understanding a child's heart required more than wealth or authority. It required patience, empathy, and a willingness to let the child lead the way. The girl's approach taught him more about connection than any tutor or therapist ever had. Over time, the boy began to communicate more confidently, using gestures, drawings, and expressions. He no longer feared being misunderstood, because the girl had shown him that someone could truly see him as he was. His emotions, once locked away, began to surface, not with the loud, desperate cries of before, but with gentle expressions, laughter that was fragile at first, but grew stronger each day. The bond between them became unspoken but undeniable, a quiet trust that neither needed to explain in words. And slowly, the mansion began to feel like a home, rather than just a house filled with wealth. The boy's world, once heavy and isolating, now had warmth, comfort, and a spark of friendship. Something as simple as trust had begun to transform his life, reshaping his days from silent suffering to cautious hope. And in this small, quiet corner of the mansion, the first true connection had been made, setting the stage for the truth to be uncovered, for hearts to be opened, and for a boy to finally feel understood. After days of quiet observation, gentle gestures, and shared moments, the girl finally discovered the truth behind the boy's tears. It was not something physical, nor something that money could fix. It was deeper, hidden within the boy's heart, a loneliness and longing that no luxury could ever reach. For the first time, someone saw not just the outward signs of sadness, but the silent pain that had been building inside him for years. The boy, though still cautious, began to respond more openly to the girl's presence. He would sit closer, share his toys, point to things he liked, and even smile when she mirrored his movements. It was through these small, seemingly ordinary interactions that the girl realized the real cause of his tears. He wanted connection, genuine human connection, someone who could understand him without needing explanations, someone who could see him for who he truly was. The black girl's heart ached as she understood the depth of his isolation. She knew that despite the wealth surrounding him, despite the endless toys and games, he had been starved of simple human warmth. He had been seen as the son of a billionaire, a child to entertain or instruct, rather than as a person with feelings, dreams, and fears. She realized that the tears were not just sadness, they were a silent plea for understanding, for someone to care beyond material things. Slowly, she began to bridge that gap, offering not gifts, but attention, not lessons, but companionship, not instruction, but empathy. Through her patience, the boy began to express feelings he had never shared before, pointing to a corner where he liked to sit, showing a favorite drawing, or simply holding her hand for reassurance. The girl recognized that each small gesture was a revelation, a tiny key unlocking the emotions he had kept hidden for so long. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the large windows of the mansion, the boy finally allowed himself to show something extraordinary. He handed the girl a small drawing, not of toys, not of games, but of his family, the house, and himself. The picture depicted loneliness in vivid lines, with tears falling from a small figure in the center, and a small figure next to him, smiling and offering comfort. The girl understood immediately. He was showing her the very thing he had carried silently for years, the emptiness he felt in his heart. It was then that she realized her role was more important than she had imagined. She was not just a helper or a friend, she was the first person in his life who could truly understand and accept him without judgment. Her empathy had uncovered the truth that no amount of wealth or attention could have revealed. She explained through gestures and soft smiles that she understood, that he was not alone, and that someone cared about him for who he really was. The boy's tears changed that day, not disappearing completely, but transforming. They became a release, a way to let go of the weight he had carried for so long. They were no longer only signs of sadness, but also expressions of relief, of being understood, of finally being seen. The mansion, which had once echoed with confusion and sorrow, now resonated with small laughter, quiet joy, and the subtle magic of genuine connection. When the billionaire saw this change, he was struck by a powerful realization. All the gifts, tutors, and luxury in the world had failed, yet the presence of one kind, observant, and patient girl had succeeded. The truth was clear. Emotional understanding, empathy, and authentic human connection were far more powerful than wealth. The girl had uncovered not only the reason for his tears, but also the path to healing, a path that would change the boy's life forever. And so, the truth, once hidden and heavy, was finally revealed, not through explanations or interventions, but through the quiet, caring presence of someone who chose to see the boy as he really was. The mansion, the luxury, and the power of wealth could never have uncovered this truth. Only compassion, patience, and love could do what money never could, and in that moment, the boy's world began to transform, setting the stage for hope, happiness, and the life he had always longed for. The transformation in the boy did not go unnoticed. The billionaire and his family began to see the subtle changes, the small moments of joy, the hesitant smiles that had been absent for so long. It was not sudden, but gradual, almost invisible at first, like the slow blooming of a flower after a harsh winter, and yet, the difference was undeniable. The boy who had been wrapped in sadness and silence now carried a quiet light in his eyes. The father, who had once believed that wealth could solve every problem, now realized that money could buy toys, games, tutors, and entertainment, but it could never buy understanding, empathy, or love. The truth hit him with the force of a revelation he had not expected. He had built walls of luxury around his son, thinking that providing everything material would protect him, and yet, in doing so, he had overlooked what mattered most: human connection. The mother, too, felt the weight of realization settle on her heart. She remembered nights when she had tried to soothe him with lullabies and gifts, only to see the tears continue, and now she understood, it was never about the toys, the games, or the comfort, it was about being seen, being understood, and feeling that someone cared enough to listen without judgment. She began to feel gratitude toward the girl, who had accomplished what their wealth and efforts could not. Even the staff noticed the change, whispering among themselves about how the boy now interacted differently, how he laughed softly while playing, how he responded to gestures, and how he seemed more present, more alive. It was as if the mansion itself had changed, shifting from a place of unanswered questions to a home filled with hope and warmth. The family realized that the real treasure was not in their riches, but in the care, patience, and empathy that could touch a heart. The billionaire reflected on the lessons he had learned, thinking about all the nights he had spent in frustration, wondering why his son could not be happy. He understood now that happiness is not something that can be bought, it is something that grows from love, attention, and genuine understanding. He felt a mixture of guilt and gratitude, guilt for having missed the signs for so long, and gratitude for the girl who had guided his son toward joy. The boy's interactions with the girl had opened their eyes to the world he had been living in, a world full of silence, longing, and unexpressed feelings. They realized that their son's tears had been a language of their own, a way for him to communicate his loneliness and need for connection, and through patience, observation, and empathy, they finally began to decode that language, understanding that the path to healing did not lie in wealth, but in love, attention, and genuine human presence. The family began to change the way they approached their son, not by offering more gifts, but by spending time with him, engaging with him, and listening, truly listening. They learned to pay attention to the small signs, the way his hands trembled, the way his eyes moved, the subtle gestures that revealed his feelings. Every moment spent with him became a chance to deepen trust and connection, and slowly, the mansion, once cold and distant, became a place of emotional warmth. The realization was profound and humbling. For all their power and wealth, they had been blind to what their son needed most. It was not toys, tutors, or lessons. It was love, attention, and someone who could understand him without needing words. The girl had shown them the way, and in doing so, had transformed their family, teaching them that the most valuable things in life cannot be bought, only earned through patience, empathy, and genuine care. And so, the family's perspective shifted. They no longer measured success by wealth or possessions, but by the moments of joy, connection, and understanding in their son's life. They embraced the lesson fully, that true happiness comes from seeing and nurturing the heart of a child, and that even the smallest acts of empathy can uncover truths and heal wounds that money never could. The boy's tears had finally led to the awakening of a family, ready to love, listen, and cherish him for who he truly was. After the truth was uncovered, the boy's life began to change in ways that nobody could have imagined. The once quiet, tearful child slowly started to open up, revealing pieces of himself that had been locked away for years. The mansion, which had often felt cold and distant despite its grandeur, now seemed warmer, filled with the subtle hum of joy and possibility. Every corner of the house carried a little spark of hope, reflecting the transformation within the boy's heart. The girl, who had patiently built trust with him, became more than just a helper or a friend. She became a bridge between the boy's silent world and the world around him, someone who could see his emotions clearly, respond to his gestures, and provide the comfort he had longed for. Together, they laughed over small games, drew pictures that told stories of feelings, and explored spaces that the boy had never dared to enter before. Each day brought new discoveries, new moments of connection, and little victories over the sadness that had once dominated his life. The billionaire and his family watched this transformation with awe. Their hearts were full, and their eyes opened to the power of empathy, patience, and understanding. They realized that all their wealth and influence could never have replaced the simple gift of being seen, being heard, and being loved for who the boy truly was. They began to spend more time with him, not just observing, but participating, listening to his thoughts, responding to his gestures, and sharing moments that built a foundation of trust and emotional security. The boy, for the first time, felt safe and valued for more than what he had or where he came from. He began to smile freely, laugh genuinely, and show affection without fear. His tears no longer came from loneliness or confusion, but occasionally from happiness, from relief, and from the overwhelming sensation of finally being understood. The transformation was subtle at first, a flicker of light in the corners of his eyes, but gradually, it grew into a steady brightness, illuminating his entire being. The girl's presence remained a constant source of reassurance, but she encouraged independence as well, helping him explore new ways to communicate, to engage, and to express himself. She taught him that he could share his emotions without fear of misunderstanding, and that the world, though sometimes challenging, could also hold kindness and connection. The boy began to respond to the love and attention of his parents more openly, realizing that he was no longer alone, that there were people in his life who would listen, support, and care unconditionally. The mansion, once filled with unanswered questions and silent sorrow, became a home of laughter, warmth, and emotional growth. The walls that had witnessed so many tears now held echoes of playful conversations, drawings, and joyous moments shared between father, mother, child, and the girl who had changed everything. Even the staff, once anxious and unsure, noticed the shift. Their work was no longer about providing material comfort, but about nurturing an environment where the boy could thrive emotionally and socially. For the billionaire, the lesson was life-changing. He understood that true wealth is not measured in money, toys, or power, but in the ability to connect, to nurture, and to care deeply. The boy's journey had shown him that happiness and understanding are earned through patience, empathy, and genuine attention, not bought with gifts, not forced with lessons, but created through love and trust. The family embraced this lesson fully, making a promise to each other and to the boy that his emotional well-being would always come first. In the end, the boy thrived in a world that now made sense to him. Surrounded by love, empathy, and understanding, he grew confident, joyful, and curious, ready to explore life with a heart full of hope. The girl remained by his side, not as a savior, but as a companion, guiding him gently, supporting him patiently, and reminding everyone around him of the power of compassion, patience, and emotional connection. The story of the billionaire, his deaf son, and the black girl became more than a tale of sadness and tears. It became a story of hope, transformation, and the life-changing impact of being truly seen. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest, simplest acts of understanding can heal wounds that no wealth or power ever could. And as the boy laughed freely for the first time, the family finally understood that love, empathy, and connection are the greatest treasures anyone could ever find.